The alarm bells rang through the communications center on Earth Station Alpha. Officer Helen Price jumped from her chair as the emergency signal lit up her screen in bright red. She had been monitoring routine space traffic for 3 hours, and nothing like this had ever come through before. "Commander Morrison, you need to see this," she called across the room. Her voice shook a little. The signal was weak and breaking up, but she could hear voices in the background. Scared voices. Commander Jake Morrison walked over quickly. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, but right now his face looked worried. "What do you have, Helen?" "It's a distress call, sir, coming from way out in the Kepler system. The translation software is working on it, but I can already make out some words." Helen turned up the volume and they both listened. The voice that came through was unlike anything they had heard before. It sounded musical, like someone singing underwater, but there was terror in it. The universal translator worked slowly, turning the alien words into English. "Please, anyone who can hear this. Our children are dying. They drop fire from the sky. We have no weapons, no way to fight. Please help us." The signal faded in and out. Sometimes they could hear explosions in the background. Sometimes they heard crying. Jake felt his stomach turn cold. "How far away is this coming from?" he asked. Helen checked her instruments. "About 47 light years, sir. The Kepler 442 system. According to our records, there's a species called the Villani living there. They're peaceful. No military at all." Jake had heard of the Villani before. They were known throughout the galaxy for their healing abilities and their beautiful underwater cities. They had never hurt anyone. They spent their time making medicines and growing food in their oceans. "Who's attacking them?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "The computer is analyzing the weapon signatures in the background," Helen said, typing quickly. "Sir, it looks like Krex Empire technology. Energy weapons. Orbital bombardment systems." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. The Krex Empire was bad news. They were a race of reptile-like creatures who loved war more than anything else. They had been taking over star systems for the past 50 years, and nobody seemed able to stop them. They were strong, mean, and they had no mercy. "Have we forwarded this to the Galactic Council?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir, sent it an hour ago. We got their response 10 minutes back." Helen's voice got quiet. "They said it was too dangerous to get involved. The Krex have too many ships. The Council doesn't want to risk starting a bigger war." Jake felt anger building in his chest. The Galactic Council was supposed to protect peaceful species like the Villani. But when push came to shove, they always found excuses to stay safe and do nothing. What about the other big powers? The Zephyrians? The Crystal Alliance? All said no, sir. They think the Krex are too strong. They don't want to make enemies with them. Jake stared at the screen showing the signal location. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being destroyed while everyone else worried about their own safety. It made him sick. "Sir," Helen said carefully, "there's something else. The Council didn't even ask us to help. They said humans are too new to space politics. They called us primitive Deathworlders again." That word always made Jake angry. Deathworlders. That's what the other species called humans, because Earth was such a dangerous planet compared to their safe, comfortable worlds. They thought humans were savage and violent because they came from a place with storms, earthquakes, diseases, and predators. Maybe they were right about humans being different, but maybe that wasn't always a bad thing. Jake picked up his communication device and called Admiral Lisa Barnes back on Earth. She answered quickly. Her face appeared on the screen, looking tired. She had been in meetings all day. "Jake, I hope you're calling with good news. The council meetings have been nothing but arguments and politics all week. Ma'am, we have a situation." Jake quickly explained about the distress call from the Villani. He played the recording for her. When it finished, Admiral Barnes was quiet for a long moment. "The council already said no?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Everyone said no. They're all too scared of the Krex." Admiral Barnes rubbed her forehead. "I can't say I blame them. The Krex have 12 capital ships in that system, according to our intelligence. That's a lot of firepower. So we're just going to let them die?" Jake asked. He tried to keep his voice respectful, but it was hard. "I didn't say that." Admiral Barnes looked at him with sharp eyes. "How many ships do we have available for immediate deployment?" Jake felt his heart speed up. 3 destroyers and the medical frigate Mercy, ma'am. Captain Ryan Torres has been asking for a real mission for months. Torres is a good man. Lost his whole squad on Titan to save civilians. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's him." She paused, thinking. But Jake, I want you to understand what we're talking about here. If we do this, we'll be going against the Council's decision. We'll be risking war with the Krex Empire, and we'll be doing it with 4 ships against 12. Yes, ma'am, I understand. And if we lose, Earth could be next on the Krex target list. Yes, ma'am. Admiral Barnes was quiet again. In the background, Jake could hear another piece of the Villani transmission playing. Someone was crying for their children. Get me Captain Torres on the line, Admiral Barnes said finally, and prepare those ships for immediate departure. If the galaxy won't help the Villani, then the Deathworlders will. Jake smiled for the first time all day. Yes, ma'am. As he worked to contact Captain Torres and prepare the mission, Jake thought about what they were about to do. 4 human ships against 12 Krex warships. No backup. No support from the galactic community. Most people would call it suicide. But sometimes being called a Deathworlder meant you were crazy enough to do the right thing, when everyone else was too smart to try. The Villani had asked for help, and their plea was about to be answered. Captain Ryan Torres stood on the bridge of his destroyer, watching the stars stretch into lines as they jumped to hyperspace. Behind him, 3 other ships followed, the destroyers Ranger and Guardian, plus the medical frigate Mercy. It wasn't much of a fleet, but it was all Earth could spare. 2 weeks to reach Kepler 442, announced Lieutenant Ben Hayes from the navigation station. Ben was young, maybe 25, but he was the best pilot Torres had ever seen. Right now, though, he looked nervous. 2 weeks to prepare for the impossible, Torres muttered. He turned to address his bridge crew. All right, people. Everyone knows why we're here. The Villani are dying, and we're the only ones willing to help. Let's use these 2 weeks to figure out how to beat odds that would make other people run away screaming. Dr. Amy Carter looked up from her research station. She was the fleet's expert on alien biology, and she had been studying everything they knew about their destination. Captain, I've been reviewing the environmental data on Kepler 442b. I think I understand why the other council races won't go there. Lay it on me. Doc, Amy pulled up a holographic display of the planet. It looked beautiful from space with blue oceans and green continents, but the numbers floating around it told a different story. Gravity is 1.3 times Earth normal. Most galactic species would need powered exoskeletons just to walk around. The atmosphere has trace amounts of chlorine and sulfur compounds that would be poisonous to about 90% of known life forms. Surface temperature averages 45 degrees Celsius with humidity levels that would cook most aliens alive. Ben whistled low. No wonder they call us Deathworlders. That place would kill anyone who didn't grow up somewhere as nasty as Earth. Gets worse, Amy continued. The oceans have a pH level that would dissolve the shells and skin of most aquatic species. But the Villani evolved there, so it's paradise to them. They probably think we're insane for wanting to visit. Torres smiled grimly. So we'll be fighting in an environment that's poison to the enemy, but just another day at the office for us. I like those odds better already. Over the next few days, the crew worked non-stop to prepare. They studied everything they could find about Krex tactics and technology. The reptilian aliens were known for their heavy shields and powerful energy weapons, but they were also known for being careful. They liked to fight from a distance where they felt safe. Lieutenant Commander Kate Mason, Torres's second-in-command, ran combat simulations with the other ship captains. Kate was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion and the asteroid mining wars. If anyone could figure out how to win an impossible fight, it was her. The Krex have us outgunned 4-1, she reported during their daily briefing. Their shields can absorb our missile attacks, and their plasma cannons have longer range than our weapons. In a straight fight, we lose badly. Then we don't fight straight, Torres replied. What advantages do we have? Ben spoke up from his station. Speed, sir. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable. The Krex build for heavy armor and big guns, not for dancing around. And the environment, added Dr. Carter. Like I said, that planet will be hostile to them but manageable for us. If we can force them to fight close to the surface, we level the playing field. Torres nodded. What else do we know about Krex psychology? Amy pulled up another display. They're predators, but careful ones. They like to hunt prey that can't fight back. When they encounter real resistance, especially from someone they consider inferior, they tend to get angry and make mistakes. And they definitely consider us inferior, Kate added with a bitter laugh. The intelligence reports say their commander, Admiral Zextai, has been bragging about how he's going to teach the Deathworld savages a lesson. Torres felt that familiar cold anger building in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had on Titan when the pirates were shooting at civilian transports. The same feeling that had made him charge their position with nothing but a rifle and a grenade. Good. Angry enemies make stupid decisions. What about the Villani? Can they help us at all? Amy shook her head sadly. They're completely peaceful, Captain. No weapons, no military knowledge. They've never even had wars among themselves. They'll be able to tell us where the cracks are, but that's about it. That's enough. Local intelligence is always valuable. As the days passed, Torres spent time talking with each member of his crew. He wanted to make sure everyone understood what they were getting into. This wasn't like the colonial conflicts or pirate raids they were used to. This was a real war against a superior enemy. Chief Engineer Pete Clark was working on modifications to their engines and weapon systems. Pete was an older man who had served on cargo ships before joining the military. He knew how to make broken things work and how to push machines beyond their limits. I can give you maybe 20% more power to the weapons, Pete reported. But it'll mean taking power from life support and artificial gravity. We'll be breathing thin air and floating around like we're in 0G. Do it, Torres ordered. We can hold our breath and deal with floating. Can't fight if we're dead. Pilot Sarah Kim was practicing attack runs in the flight simulator. Sarah flew the fast attack shuttles that launched from the destroyers. Her job would be to get in close while the big ships kept the Creks busy. Captain, I've been thinking about something, Sarah said during one of their planning sessions. The Creks probably expect us to run away as soon as we see how outnumbered we are. What if we do the opposite? What if we charge straight at them? Torres raised an eyebrow. Explain. Well, they think we're primitive and stupid, right? What if we act like it? Come in screaming and shooting like maniacs? They'll think we've lost our minds, and while they're trying to figure out what we're doing, maybe we can sucker punch them. Kate laughed. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Why not both? Torres replied. The best plans usually are. As they got closer to their destination, the crew's mood grew more serious. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone knew that most of them probably wouldn't be coming home. But nobody complained. Nobody asked to be transferred to a safer mission. On the last night before they reached Kepler 442, Torres walked through the ship, checking on his people. In the engine room, Pete was still working on the power modifications. In the weapons bay, the gunners were loading extra ammunition. In the medical bay, Dr. Carter was preparing supplies for Villani casualties. Captain, Ben called from the bridge as Torres returned. We're picking up long-range transmissions from the Villani. Want to hear them? Torres nodded and Ben played the recordings. The musical voices were weaker now, more desperate. There were fewer of them. The Creks had been busy during the 2 weeks it took the human fleet to arrive. Sir, Helen Price said quietly, according to these transmissions, the Creks have destroyed at least 6 major cities. The orbital bombardment is getting worse. Torres felt that cold anger turn into burning rage. While they had been traveling through space, people were dying. Children were dying, and all because the galaxy was too scared to stand up to bullies. How long until we arrive? He asked. 18 hours, sir. Torres picked up the ship's communication system and opened a channel to the entire fleet. Attention all hands. In 18 hours, we're going to drop out of hyperspace into hell. The enemy has us outnumbered and outgunned. Our own allies have abandoned us. The galaxy thinks we're too primitive to matter. But you know what? Sometimes being primitive is exactly what the situation calls for. Sometimes being from a death world means you're the only one crazy enough to do what needs to be done. The Villani asked for help, and by God, we're going to give it to them. Get some rest, check your gear, and prepare to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. Torres closed the channel and stared out at the stars. Soon those stars would be filled with laser fire and explosions. Soon they would either be heroes or dead, maybe both. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately every person on every bridge fell silent. Through the viewports they could see what the Creks Empire had done to the Villani homeworld. The planet that should have been a beautiful blue-green marble was scarred with massive craters. Entire sections of ocean were boiling from the heat of orbital bombardment. The polar ice caps were melting, sending huge clouds of steam into the atmosphere. Debris from destroyed cities floated in space like a graveyard of dreams. Dear God, whispered Dr. Amy Carter from her station. She had seen war before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just an attack. This was the deliberate extermination of an entire species. Captain Torres stood frozen for a moment, staring at the destruction. He had expected a battle zone, but this looked more like the end of the world. Communications, can you reach any Villani survivors? Helen Price worked frantically at her console. I'm trying, sir. Most of the communication satellites have been destroyed. Wait, I'm getting something. It's very weak, coming from deep underwater. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was barely a whisper, but the musical quality was unmistakable. The universal translator worked slowly, turning the alien words into English. This is Swimming in Moonlight of the Deep Current Clan. Is someone there? Please, if anyone can hear this, we are dying. Our children hide in the deepest trenches while fire falls from the sky. We have lost so many. Torres stepped forward. This is Captain Ryan Torres of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We're here to help. There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, filled with disbelief. Earth Defense Force? You are the humans? The ones the Council calls Deathworlders? That's us. How many of you are left? Perhaps 50,000 in our deep shelters. But the bombardment continues. The water grows hotter each day. Soon even the deep places will not be safe. Torres felt his jaw clench. 50,000. Out of a population that had once numbered in the hundreds of millions. Can you give us locations of Krek's positions? Yes, but... Human Torres, you should know. The Council species came here 3 days ago. A single ship. They said they were sorry but could not risk war with the Kreks. They told us we were on our own. Torres exchanged glances with Kate Mason. So the Council hadn't just refused to help. They had actually visited the dying planet to personally tell the Villani they were going to be abandoned. Well, swimming in moonlight, the Deathworlders have a different opinion about leaving people to die. Before the Villani could respond, proximity alarms started blaring throughout the human fleet. Lieutenant Ben Hayes called out from his station. Captain, 12 Kreks warships moving to intercept. They're big ones, sir. Dreadnought class. Through the viewports, the Kreks fleet looked like a pack of metal predators sliding through space. Their ships were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports and heavy armor plating. Each one was twice the size of the largest human destroyer. Incoming transmission from the Kreks flagship, Helen announced. Put it on screen. The image that appeared showed a creature that looked like a cross between a crocodile and a dragon. Admiral Zextai had green scales, yellow eyes, and teeth that looked designed for tearing flesh. When he spoke, his voice was a low growl. So the galactic barbarians have come to play hero. I am Admiral Zextai of the Krek's 4th Fleet. You have entered Krek's territorial space illegally. Surrender now, and I will grant you the honor of a quick death. Torres stepped into view of the camera. He was smaller than the Krek's admiral, less armored and clearly outgunned. But his eyes held something that made even Zextai pause for a moment. This is Captain Ryan Torres. You are committing genocide against a peaceful species. Withdraw from this system immediately, or we will remove you. Zextai stared at him for several seconds, then threw back his head and laughed. It was a sound like grinding metal. Remove us? You have 4 primitive ships against my 12 dreadnoughts. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your armor cannot stop our plasma cannons. This will not be a battle. This will be an execution, Admiral, Torres said calmly. You clearly don't understand what it means to be a Deathworlder. Let me educate you. Torres cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships, battle stations. Execute Plan Omega. Kate Mason looked at him with concern. Captain, are you sure about this? Plan Omega is basically controlled suicide. It's the only way to even the odds. The Kreks think they're fighting a conventional space battle. They're about to learn that Deathworlders don't fight conventional battles. Ben Hayes was already plotting their course. Sir, recommend we aim for the atmosphere of the planet. The radiation and heat down there will cook most alien species, but we can handle it. Do it. All ships, follow us in. We're taking this fight to ground level. The human fleet suddenly accelerated toward the planet, diving straight down instead of engaging in traditional space combat. The Kreks were caught completely off guard. They had expected the humans to either flee or try to fight at long range where numbers mattered most. Krek's fleet is pursuing, reported Ben. They're having trouble with the atmospheric interference. Their targeting systems are going crazy. Dr. Carter was monitoring the environmental conditions. Temperature outside is now 60 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels are climbing. Atmospheric pressure is crushing. Most galactic species would need full environmental suits just to survive down here. And us? Torres asked. Hot day in Texas, sir. We'll be fine. The first Krek ship that followed them into the atmosphere immediately had problems. Their environmental systems, designed for the sterile conditions of space combat, began failing in the toxic soup of the planet's upper atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across their bridge as systems overheated. Meanwhile, the human ships were performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. They dove through clouds of superheated steam, used the planet's magnetic field to disrupt enemy sensors, and flew through radiation storms that would have killed crews from safer worlds. Pilot Sarah, Kim, launched her attack shuttle from the Guardian and immediately dove into a thermal vent that was spewing poisonous gases into the atmosphere. The Krek's fighters that tried to follow her were forced to break off when their life support systems started failing. "This is insane," transmitted one of the Krek ship captains to Admiral Zextai. "The Deathworlders are flying through conditions that would kill us in minutes." "How are they even alive?" Zextai stared at his tactical display in growing amazement and anger. The human ships were not just surviving in the planet's hostile environment, they were using it as a weapon. They flew through areas where his ships couldn't follow, attacked from angles that should have been impossible, and seemed completely unaffected by conditions that were pushing his technology to its limits. "It doesn't matter," he snarled. "They still cannot penetrate our shields. Focus fire on the lead ship. I want that human captain dead." But as the Kreks concentrated their attack on Torres's destroyer, they made a crucial mistake. They forgot about the other human ships, and they forgot about the planet itself. Chief Engineer Pete Clark had been waiting for this moment. With most of the Krek's firepower focused on the command ship, he initiated his modifications. Power that should have gone to life support and gravity was redirected to weapons and engines. The human ship suddenly became much faster and hit much harder. At the same time, Ben Hayes executed a maneuver that used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around to the dark side of the planet. The Krek ships that tried to follow found themselves flying blind through the night side of a world, covered in electrical storms and volcanic eruptions, swimming in moonlight, had been monitoring the battle from the deep ocean trenches. Through sensors that the Kreks had missed, the Volani watched as the 4 human ships danced through conditions that would have destroyed any other fleet. "How is this possible?" Swimming in Moonlight asked over the communication channel. "Your ships moved through poison and fire as if they were gentle currents." Torres, gripping his command chair as the ship shook from weapons fire and atmospheric turbulence, managed to smile. "Ma'am, we come from a world that's been trying to kill us since we were born. This is just another day at the office." The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the distress call had been received, the humans had hope. They were doing what Deathworlders did best, turning a hostile environment into an ally and using their natural advantages to fight impossible odds. Admiral Zextai was learning a hard lesson. Sometimes the primitive barbarians are primitive and barbaric for very good reasons. The battle raged for 3 hours in the poisonous atmosphere of Kepler 442b. What had started as a conventional space engagement had turned into something the Kreks had never experienced before. Aerial combat in conditions that challenged the very limits of survival. Captain Torres watched his tactical display as the human ships darted through volcanic ash clouds and radiation storms. The Kreks were struggling to keep up. Their heavy dreadnoughts were built for space battles, not for flying through the atmosphere of a death world. "Krek's flagship is having environmental problems," reported Ben Hayes from the navigation station. "Their shields are draining power just to keep the heat and radiation out. Our sensors show their internal temperature is climbing fast." Dr. Amy Carter looked up from her monitoring station. "Captain, I'm reading the biological signatures from the Krek ships. Their crew members are starting to suffer from heat exhaustion. Most reptilian species can't regulate body temperature the way mammals do. They're literally cooking inside their own ships." Torres smiled grimly. "While we're what, comfortable? Well, it's hot and the air is toxic, but nothing we can't handle. Chief Clark has the environmental systems running perfectly. We're breathing recycled air and dealing with high-G maneuvers like we're driving sports cars." On the Krek's flagship, Admiral Zextai was discovering the disadvantages of being from a comfortable world. His bridge crew was sweating heavily, and several officers had already collapsed from heat stroke. The ship's environmental systems were draining so much power that weapons and shields were operating at reduced capacity. "How are they doing this?" he demanded, staring at his tactical screen. The human ships were flying patterns that defied logic, using the planet's natural phenomena as cover and concealment. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the Deathworlders just flew through a sulfur dioxide cloud that would have killed our entire crew in 30 seconds. They emerged on the other side and launched missiles at the Retribution. Direct hit on their engine section." Zextai watched in disbelief as one of his dreadnoughts spun out of control, its engines damaged, and its life support failing. The ship had to emergency jump to space just to keep the crew alive. Meanwhile, pilot Sarah Kim was having the time of her life. Her attack shuttle dove through a thermal vent that was shooting superheated gas high into the atmosphere. The Krex fighters that tried to follow her were forced to break off when their heat shield started failing. "This is Sarah to all human ships," she called over the radio. "I just found something interesting. There's a massive electrical storm on the dark side of the planet. The Krex can't see through it, but our sensors can penetrate it just fine." Lieutenant Commander Kate Mason immediately saw the opportunity. "All ships follow Sarah's lead. We're going to use that storm as cover for a coordinated attack." The human fleet disappeared into a wall of lightning and electromagnetic chaos that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The Krex sensors went completely blind. Their instruments couldn't penetrate the storm and their ships couldn't safely enter it. But the humans had grown up with storms. Earth's weather was violent and unpredictable, and human technology was designed to work in harsh conditions. Their ships flew through the electrical storm like they were sailing through rough seas. Chief Engineer Pete Clark was in his element. With the ship taking constant electrical hits from the storm, he had to reroute power systems on the fly, balance loads, and keep everything running while being struck by lightning every few seconds. "Captain," he called over the intercom, "I'm reading massive power surges from the storm. If I can time this right, I can use the next lightning strike to overcharge our weapon systems. We'll get about 3 times normal firepower for maybe 10 seconds. "Do it," Torres ordered. Pete watched his instruments carefully, timing the electrical patterns of the storm. When the next massive lightning bolt hit the ship, he channeled that energy directly into the weapon systems. For a brief moment, the human destroyer had the firepower of a battleship. They emerged from the storm directly behind the Krex flagship, weapons blazing with borrowed lightning. The concentrated fire overloaded the Krex shields and punched holes in their armor plating. Admiral Zextai felt his ship shake as the human weapons tore through his defenses. Impossible. Their ships are too small to generate that much firepower. But his tactical officer had a different theory. "Sir, I think they used the planet's electrical storm to overcharge their weapons." That's actually brilliant. And completely insane. Swimming in Moonlight and the other Villani survivors watched the battle from their deep ocean shelters. Through their sensors, they could see the human ships performing maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics and common sense. "How do they fly through poison clouds like they're swimming through clear water?" asked one of the younger Villani. "They're Deathworlders," Swimming in Moonlight replied with something like awe in her voice. "They come from a place so dangerous that this nightmare world feels like home to them." The tide of battle was slowly turning. The Krex had superior numbers and firepower, but they were fighting in an environment that drained their resources and taxed their technology to the breaking point. The humans, meanwhile, were actually getting stronger as the battle went on. They learned to use each new hazard as a weapon. When the Ranger flew too close to an active volcano, Captain Lisa Park didn't retreat. Instead, she used the volcanic eruption to mask her approach on a Krex cruiser. The enemy ship never saw the missile attack coming through the wall of lava and ash. When the Guardian's shields were damaged by Krex plasma fire, Captain John White didn't fall back for repairs. Instead, he flew into a radiation storm that recharged his shields while cooking the pursuing Krex fighters. Dr. Carter was coordinating with the Villani survivors, getting real-time intelligence about Krex positions and weaknesses. The Villani might not be warriors, but they knew their planet better than anyone. "Captain Torres," Swimming in Moonlight called over the communication channel, "there is a thermal vent system beneath the Krex Admiral's ship. If you could trigger an eruption." "How do we do that?" Torres asked. "The vents are sealed by crystalline deposits. A strong enough shockwave should break them open, but you would have to get very close to the ocean surface." Torres looked at his crew. Flying that low would mean diving into the most toxic, radioactive, heat-soaked part of the planet's atmosphere. It would be like flying through liquid poison. "Ben, how close can you get us to the ocean surface?" Ben Hayes grinned. "Close enough to touch the water if you want, sir. The ship can handle it. Kate, can you coordinate the other ships to cover us?" Kate Mason nodded. "Just give us 30 seconds to get their attention." Torres activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Torres. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. Cover us for 30 seconds, then get ready to mop up whatever's left. The human destroyer dove toward the ocean at maximum speed, passing through layers of toxic atmosphere that would have dissolved most alien spacecraft. The heat was incredible, the radiation was lethal, and the chemical composition of the air would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. To the humans, it was just another extreme environment to conquer. They reached the ocean surface and fired every missile they had at the thermal vents below. The shock waves from the explosions traveled down through the water and cracked the crystalline seals that had been holding back the planet's molten core. The result was spectacular. A massive column of superheated water and steam erupted directly beneath the Krex flagship, engulfing the huge ship in temperatures that exceeded the melting point of most metals. Admiral Zextai had just enough time to realize what was happening before his ship's hull began to buckle and his crew started evacuating. To escape pods, the Krex fleet, seeing their flagship crippled and their admiral defeated, began to retreat. They had come to Kepler 442 expecting an easy massacre of defenseless prey. Instead, they had found Deathworlders who turned hell itself into a weapon. As the surviving Krex ships limped away into space, Captain Torres opened a channel to swimming in moonlight. "Ma'am, I think we've convinced them to leave you alone." The response came back filled with gratitude and wonder. "Human Torres, we called for aid and the galaxy abandoned us." Only the Deathworlders answered, "We will remember this debt for all time." Torres looked around at his crew. They were exhausted, battered, and covered in sweat, but they were smiling. They had done the impossible, and they had saved an entire species in the process. Maybe being called Deathworlders wasn't such an insult after all. The celebration was short-lived. As the damaged Krex ships retreated toward the edge of the system, Admiral Zextai's voice crackled over the communication channels one final time. "You have won this battle, Deathworlders, but the war is far from over. The Krex Empire will not forget this insult. We will return with 100 ships and we will burn your pathetic homeworld to ash." Captain Torres felt his blood run cold. He had saved the Villani, but now Earth itself was in danger. The Krex would want revenge and they had the firepower to get it. "Sir," called Lieutenant Ben Hayes from the navigation station, "long-range sensors are detecting something. The retreating Krex fleet is being joined by reinforcements. Looks like 20 more ships, sir." Dr. Amy Carter looked up from her console with alarm. "Captain, if they're bringing that many ships back to finish what they started, we won't be able to stop them. Our ships are damaged, we're low on ammunition, and we're still 47 light-years from the nearest human outpost." Torres stared at the tactical display. 24 Krex warships against his 3 remaining destroyers and the medical frigate. Even with the advantages they had used in the atmosphere, those odds were impossible. "Captain," came swimming in Moonlight's voice over the communication system, "we are detecting the return of the Krex vessels. Are they coming back to finish their attack?" Torres didn't want to answer that question. The Villani had suffered enough. They didn't need to know that their rescuers were about to be overwhelmed. But before he could respond, something unexpected happened. Chief Engineer Pete Clark called out from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. These aren't Krex signatures." On the main screen, new ships began to appear. First 1, then 5, then 20. They were sleek vessels with unfamiliar designs, but their transmission signatures were broadcasting Galactic Council identification codes. "This is Admiral Cathara of the Zephyrian Fleet," came a new voice over the radio. "Human vessels, please respond." Torres felt his heart skip a beat. The Zephyrians were one of the most powerful races in the galaxy. What were they doing here? "This is Captain Torres. Admiral, we weren't expecting Council support. Captain Torres, 3 days ago the Galactic Council voted to condemn your unauthorized intervention in this system. But sometimes the Council makes the wrong decision. My government has decided to reconsider our position. More ships were arriving. Crystal Alliance cruisers, Andromedan frigates, even some species that Torres didn't recognize. Within an hour, the space around Kepler 442 was filled with 47 warships from a dozen different civilizations. Lieutenant Commander Kate Mason stared at the tactical display in amazement. "Captain, that's more firepower than the Krex Empire has deployed in this entire sector. Where did they all come from?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Lisa Barnes's face appeared on the communication screen and she was smiling. Captain Torres, I thought you might like to know what's been happening back home while you've been playing hero. Admiral, how did you coordinate all this? Last I heard, the Council had voted against intervention. They did. But sometimes news travels fast in the galaxy. Word got out about 4 human ships taking on 12 Krex dreadnoughts to save a species nobody else would help. Apparently, that story reached some people who still remember what it means to do the right thing. Admiral Cathara's voice came back on the channel. Captain Torres, my species may live on comfortable worlds, but we have not forgotten courage when we see it. The Zephyrian government has decided that if Deathworlders are willing to risk everything to save strangers, perhaps the rest of us should be willing to risk something too. Similar messages came from the other fleet commanders. The Crystal Alliance spoke about honor. The Andromedans talked about justice. The smaller species mentioned gratitude for humanity's example, but it was Swimming in Moonlight who said what everyone was thinking. The galaxy watched us die, and only the Deathworlders came to help. Now they all want to stand with the humans. It is, what is your word, ironic. Admiral Zextai's reinforced fleet arrived to find themselves facing not 4 damaged human ships, but a combined force that outnumbered them 2-1. The Krex Admiral's transmission was much less confident this time. This is a Krex territorial expansion operation. All foreign vessels will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Torres looked around at his bridge crew, then keyed his microphone. Admiral Zextai, this is Captain Torres. You wanted to teach the Deathworlders a lesson. How's that working out for you? The response was a long silence, followed by the rapid retreat of the entire Krex fleet. Over the following weeks, an amazing transformation took place on Kepler 442b. The combined fleet brought medical supplies, engineering teams, and disaster relief specialists. The Villani cities began to rebuild, their beautiful underwater habitats slowly returning to life. Dr. Carter established a permanent research station on the planet, working with Villani scientists to develop new medical technologies. The partnership between the peaceful healers and the battle-hardened humans proved incredibly productive. Swimming in Moonlight often visited the human research station. She was fascinated by the Deathworlders who had saved her people. I still do not understand, she said during one of their conversations. Your people come from such a dangerous world. You could have evolved to be cautious to avoid risk. Instead, you risk everything for strangers. Why? Dr. Carter thought about that question for a long time. Maybe because we know what it's like to face impossible odds. When you come from a world that's trying to kill you every day, you learn that sometimes the only way to survive is to help each other. The news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. The story grew in the telling, as stories do. Soon everyone knew about the 4 human ships that had taken on impossible odds to save a dying species, and how their courage had shamed the galaxy into action. Admiral Barnes received official communications from dozens of governments. Some were apologies for not acting sooner. Others were requests for military cooperation agreements. A few were invitations for Earth to take a more active role in galactic politics. But the most important message came from the Villani themselves. Swimming in Moonlight addressed the Galactic Council in a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives of the great civilizations, we called for help when our children were dying and you turned away. You said it was too dangerous, too risky, too unwise to help us. But 4 ships from Earth heard our call and came anyway. 4 ships crewed by beings you call Deathworlders, primitives, barbarians. These Deathworlders faced 12 enemy warships to save strangers they had never met. They flew through poison and fire, fought in conditions that would kill most species, and refused to give up even when victory seemed impossible. Today my people are alive because Deathworlders understood something that advanced civilizations had forgotten. Sometimes being civilized means being willing to fight when others will not. Captain Torres was awarded the Galactic Medal of Honor, the first human ever to receive it. At the ceremony, he was asked to give a speech about courage and duty. I'm not good at speeches, he said simply, but I want to say something about being called Deathworlders. For a long time we thought it was an insult. Maybe it was meant to be. But we've learned something. Coming from a dangerous world doesn't make you weak or primitive. It makes you strong enough to go places others can't go, do things others won't do, and fight when others give up. If being a Deathworlder means we're the ones who show up when people are dying and everyone else is too scared to help, then I'm proud to be a Deathworlder. The Krex Empire sued for peace 6 months later. They had discovered that attacking species under human protection brought swift and overwhelming retaliation from the entire galaxy. The age of easy conquest was over, but perhaps the most lasting change was in how the galaxy saw itself. The Villani incident had shown that advanced technology in comfortable worlds could lead to moral weakness. It had taken the Deathworlders to remind everyone what courage looked like. Years later, when new species joined the galactic community, they were told the story of Kepler 442b. They learned about the 4 human ships that had answered a desperate plea when no one else would. They learned that sometimes the most important quality in a civilization wasn't how advanced they were, but how willing they were to risk everything for strangers. The Villani built a monument in their deepest city, honoring the humans who had saved them. The inscription, translated from their musical language, read simply, "To the Deathworlders who taught us that civilization is not about avoiding danger, but about facing it for others." Swimming in moonlight often visited that monument. She would tell young Villani about the day fire fell from the sky, and how the beings from the dangerous world had come to save them. "Remember," she would tell them, "when the galaxy called them primitive, they showed us what it truly means to be civilized." When everyone else was too afraid to act, the Deathworlders proved that sometimes being afraid is not as important as being willing to help. The plea for aid had been answered by the Deathworlders, and the galaxy was better for it.